District 112 to order. First on our agenda is communication from student reps, but they're studying for finals, so we'll move on to the QComp annual report.
Well, good evening, everybody. I have lots of people with me this evening to help share some of the news about QComp. As you know, we do a report to the board each year, and we have to finish it or complete it by June 15th. That's the timing of tonight's report. Some of the information that we have doesn't reflect everything about QComp this year, but we definitely will provide that later as part of the World's Best Workforce information that we do when school starts. So I have Katrina Miller here this evening, who is our administrative assistant for QComp and also works with finance. MJ Nairn, who is our lead instructional coach. We have a senior teacher, Mary Mobeck, with us, and Jess Stewart, one of our instructional coaches over at Carver Elementary. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to MJ.
Great, thank you. So we've had a few program changes this year since I met with you just about a year ago, and we'll bring you up to speed on some of those. So all teachers that work 100 or more days in the district are eligible for the QComp program. Our site bonus this year moved to just $1, and what we did was we took that compensation and we moved it into the PLC bonuses and to boost the hourly QComp rate for Summer Academy and for some other QComp tasks that teachers do. The evaluation bonus, so for teachers who are rated as proficient or better, rate remains unchanged at $575. The PLC bonus then is increased from $275 to $400, and that's based on two criteria. One is if the PLC group did the things that they had planned that they were going to do, and the second is if the group met the goal that they set. And then the hourly rate, which had been about $17 an hour for work for attending Summer Academy and for other work done under the auspices of QComp, has increased from 17 to 22. And so that all was voted on with the contract, and it's part of our MOU now. Okay. This is just an example of one of the site goals. So all of the sites in the district are charged with creating a goal, and this one is Clover Elementary's goal, and we chose to put this one in because they're one of our focus schools for the program review. And you may or may not, well, you probably don't remember this from last year because you really don't need to, but every year 6 of our schools, and on a rotating basis, are the focus schools for the evaluation and the program review, and so this is Clover's goal. Most of the sites chose a reading goal, and we did have 2 sites choose a math goal. So our Family Learning Center and Chanhassen High School have a math goal instead of a reading goal. Just to review the 5 standards in the McCrell rubric, and so this is the teacher development and evaluation rubric that we use. Standard 1 is all about leadership, leadership for the building in the district, serving on curriculum committees, advocating for positive change, things like that. Standard 2 is all about environment, so how teachers create a welcoming environment, how they help students understand things from multiple perspectives, co-teaching with special education teachers, working with families, those kinds of things. Standard 3 is all about sort of content knowledge and curricular expertise. So these are, we look at this in terms of how teachers can align their instruction with standards, the relevance of the curriculum, global awareness. I think last time I was here I told you about an example of our advanced math application classes, and I had a chance to visit them again this year. One of the coolest things they did was a college expenses budgeting project where students actually had to figure out their college expenses, figure out how much money they would need to take in loans to finance the college of their choice, and then what student loan interest is like and how that would be calculated. So that I thought was really a real-world application. Standard 4 is all about instruction and instructional strategies, and Standard 5 is about ongoing reflection. So those are just the standards that we use for development and evaluation. The personalized learning star really fits very well with Standard 4, and all of the elements can be found in the instructional practice standards, and so we have aligned all the different elements to the star with the McCrell rubric, so there's a lot of overlap and alignment there. I do remember showing this to you last year, but we have something new with it this year, so I wanted to show it to you again. This is just one element of Standard 4 on the McCrell rubric, and it's all about planning appropriate instruction. Here in red you can see I've highlighted teachers engage students in curriculum curriculum responsive to cultural differences and individual learning needs. Cultural competency is a brand new required area now from MDE and the new Professional Educators Licensing and Standards Board. There's no cool acronym for it, but at all. Suffice it to say that this is a new area that's required for all teachers who are getting their licenses, so teachers have to earn at least one CEU for every renewal cycle. And so we'll be paying close attention to this and making sure that in the PD we design and facilitate for teachers, that they get that done in-house. Just some overall stats and figures from our evaluation system. There's 49 evaluators, so administrators, supervisors, deans. That includes the special education director and the other SPED supervisors. All probationary teachers are required 3 formal observations and 1 summary evaluation. They do a self-assessment. They complete a professional learning plan. The continuing contract teachers get 1 formal observation and 1 summary evaluation from an administrator per year. They also do a self-assessment and create a professional learning plan. And they do check-ins throughout the year on that professional learning plan, and then at the end of the year, assess it for its effectiveness and whether or not they met their goals. Okay, so I remember last year there were lots of questions about developing proficient, accomplished, and distinguished. So Katya, who is a data guru, did put together some slides about how many teachers who ended this 15-16 school year wound up as developing, proficient, accomplished, or distinguished. One of the questions that you had asked was, what happens to these developing teachers? For this set of data here, at the end of 2016, of the 5 developing teachers, we showed that there were, I can't read my writing.
4.
Okay.
2 were non-renewed and 2 resigned, so a total of 4 have left the district and 1 stayed, and that person is now proficient.
And then we had the data for just the school year ending last year, and of the 740 teachers, we had 66 go through our induction program, and there were 7 developing at the end of last year. These developing teachers were not the same ones from the year prior, and of these 7, 3 were non-renewed, 3 resigned, 1 remains in the district, and as of the end of this year, even though not all of the data is in, that teacher is proficient. So we've seen improvement there. Okay. So we've put together sort of trend data for you, and a lot of it falls right in the middle, and you can see there's 3-year data there, so from the school year ending 15, ending 16, and ending 17. Looking at school year ending 15, we had a lot of teachers in the proficient ranking, still some in accomplished, and distinguished was a very smaller amount. But as you look at the trend, you can see that it looks like we are moving teachers from from proficient to accomplished, and some from accomplished to distinguished. And it looks like those numbers are getting bigger as the years have progressed, and we've been working with QComp and providing additional job-embedded PD as well as late start PD and summer academy for teachers. Okay. Just some examples of the job-embedded professional development that teachers receive. We have 15 instructional coaches, and they are site-based and some itinerant. They provide ongoing instructional support for all of the classroom teachers. So anybody who's a certified staff person with a teaching license gets some peer coaching and support. And that comes in the form of daily instructional support, so sitting in with teachers, helping with lesson planning, doing some piloting of different strategies or different initiatives, providing release time for teachers. So if a teacher wants to go and see something really cool or awesome that another teacher is doing, whether it's in that same building or in another building, an instructional coach will take that class to release the teacher to go and do that. And we've had a lot more of that happen this year. So a lot of cross-pollination, I think, is going on, which is really exciting. The coaches also work with teachers and PLCs for goal setting and then in their day-to-day work. So PLCs are our professional learning communities, and this year we've seen a change in them. Per statute and per our MOU, The change has been that we are no longer focusing on just the amount of minutes that the PLC spends together, but more how are they analyzing the data? What are they looking at? What are they doing? What kind of changes are they making? What effect are those changes having? So that's a little bit of a different focus, and that's why we changed the bonus amounts. As you can see there, it's a two-part bonus, and I mentioned how that how those figures break down earlier. This year that's okay. This year we had 221 PLCs, and the numbers are a little misleading because last year we had PLCs that maybe had more teachers in them, so the number of actual PLCs was fewer. This year we did have some PLCs that were partnerships working or in smaller groups, and so the actual number of PLCs are higher. This is pretty exciting. We're full on into Summer Academy right now, and I remember telling you last year that our numbers had grown. Summer Academy is the job or the professional development that teachers put on for teachers. So this year we have 223 teachers participating so far, and registration is still open on an as-needed basis. We've got lots of teachers providing courses based on what other teachers have said they wanted. So the surveys went out to find out what types of things teachers were interested in learning about, where there were some gaps maybe in what we needed to do, and also in making sure that we provide some of the CEUs that are necessary for teachers to renew their license. So things like mental health, suicide prevention, cultural competency, those things we also try to offer during Summer Academy so teachers can meet those CEUs. The three highest enrollments so far are math expressions, movement-based learning, and that's done by Jake Jowert, who was Teacher of the Year, so you remember him, and then managing stress, anxiety, and depression within an educational setting. So those, right? Those are the top three right now. All right. So like I said earlier, there is a rotating program review. This year, the 6 sites that were involved in the analysis of data and the survey were Clover Ridge, Chanhassen High School, Chan Elementary, Victoria, Prairie Care, and Anika. And the data that we get from them, 2 things. 1, we need to share some of that with you, and then 2, that needs to be submitted to MDE. So when we and this is really kind of a systems check, so it's not the same school every year. So it's a different group of 6 schools. And so we took a look at this data, and the first number there, 54%, where it says among administrative evaluations, inter-rater reliability was consistent. We were dismayed by the data being low, by the figures, the numbers being low last year, and we're dismayed again this year. One thing to remember about, or to think about for this, was the question that we got to submit was worded a little bit differently, so it didn't, I don't think it garnered, well, it obviously didn't garner data that we wanted to see. I'd like to see that a little bit higher. What that says to me is we need to do a better job with inter-rater reliability. I remember Chris giving you an example last year of coaching, like a figure skating coach. Do you remember his skating example? How the skating coach is all about the skater. In this case, the instructional coach is all about the teacher, really buffering them up, shoring them up, making sure that the things that they're doing well are being affirmed, and then helping them when there are gaps. But the administrator role is a lot more evaluative in nature, and so because we use the same rubric, the administrators and the instructional coaches, there is a little bit of a difference in how teachers see those ratings. I'm involved in a group of metro area QComp leaders, and there are some other school districts where they don't use exactly the same rating system, and so they don't necessarily, some teachers don't necessarily perceive that there's an inter-rater reliability issue. So I think we'll just keep engaging in some ongoing PD for admin and coaches together and see if we can't move that number. The other number that I see here, 89%, use of data to inform instructional practice, and that really jumped, and I think we've done a really good job of shifting that focus from the PLC work this year to really emphasize the use of data. So because the teachers are no longer being rated on how many minutes they sit in a seat for PLC work, but rather what they're doing when they're together, what kind of data they're looking at, what changes they're making, that number has shifted, and I think that's a real positive.
I'd like to invite.
Yes. So now we've got a coach and a teacher here, and we're at the part where we do have on the screen some anecdotal data from the surveys that we sent out. So these are just responses from teachers that have come back. And Jess Stewart, one of our instructional coaches, and Mary Mobeck, one of our, I was going to say veteran, highly experienced and loved teachers is here to.
Beloved.
And beloved teachers are here. So.
Hi there, thank you for having us. We are here just to kind of speak about kind of roles as coaches and how that impacts teachers so that they can impact student achievement. And really our role is to help them grow as professionals using that McCrell rubric as a guide. So we're helping them in their leadership by helping them push for student achievement through PD that we may be offering. Also helping create that positive environment for students by leading things with culturally responsive teaching and equity practices. Also talking about content, allowing people to see how other people are teaching for strategies, and also just how they're teaching different content in different ways so that it may be accessible to students. And then also just allowing for reflection. And I think that our role as coaches is really to build upon that reflection piece so that teachers can not only see what's happening in other classrooms, but think about how that can impact their learners. And really, I think Mary could probably speak better to how that has impacted her as a teacher so she can impact student learning.
I was just listening to everything said tonight. It was all on my list here. But as a teacher, coming from that perspective, first of all, the instructional coaches have been amazing that we've had. And it is different than the principal coming in or an administrator coming in. And it's a colleague, but they still help us stay focused. And I really like that. It's a chance to experiment with new things and to have that reflection piece. And it really is about the students. We want to get better so the students are getting better. And I love, for instance, Jessica coming in. And if I want to know, do the kids really know what they're learning today? You know, learning targets that we all talk about. Is it just on the wall, or do they know what they're talking about? She'll collect data for me with conversations with the kids and come back and share that with me. And so I might have a perception that, oh, I'm doing a great job. And she'll go, yeah, about 3 of the kids knew what they were doing. The other kids said I had to finish a paper. So it's good to have that coming back to us. And starting new things in technology, Seesaw was something new I started this year. And if I didn't have Jess there next to me going through it with me, because it is time. Teachers are always asking for time, and this helps us immensely, that she does a lot of the back work and then comes and works with us. And that way I was able to have the students show their work to their parents on Seesaw. So it was sent back. The parents would send them a message, loved your poetry, that they would send. And so another thing was using the technology. There are cheerleaders. You know, everything is busy at school. We have so many initiatives. And you just don't hear very often that you're doing a good job. So it's nice to have them coming in going, hey, this is great, and I see it happening there, over there. They also have a big picture. We are in our classroom, and we have a list of things to do, and I think sometimes we forget what does the big picture look like, and they're really good about that reflection piece and bringing us back to that star. Are you covering the star? And things like that on there. So I really appreciate that. And I do feel in the long run, the students are benefiting from it because we're more aware of what we're doing. And then that reflection piece carries over to the students. So I don't know. I love it. I hope it never goes away because even as a teacher who's taught over 36, going to 36, there's always something new that's going on. And even though she's a science teacher and I'm an elementary teacher, it's best practice, and she's seeing things and just leading us in those great questions that we need to do. So I love it.
And I have to say on my end, it doesn't just go that way, it comes this way. being able to see, as a coach, see what's happening in the other classrooms, the things that I'm going to be taking back to my classroom when I go back to it are, I can't, I'm so excited but nervous. There's so many things I know now that I could be using in the classroom, so it's going both ways. I mean, I'm glad that you're feeling that you're being supported professionally and helping your students, but I feel the same way. I think it goes back and
And
forth.
one more thing is just kind of a funny story. The equity piece, which is a new part of the cultural awareness on our teacher licenses now. So we've been focusing on equity, but once again, there's so much going on in the classroom and you tend to forget all this stuff. So you go into the bathrooms at our school and right on the back of the door in a different color each week is a new tip to remember to do in your classroom. So they're everywhere.
Hey,
We
I know
take
they're gonna
advantage
see
of
it.
every moment you're in the building.
So anyway, I am just a big proponent of this. And I feel, speaking for teachers, it is very helpful just to have a colleague there, especially if you want to have someone cover for you or have time to speak to our own students sometimes, that they could be doing something that we can talk to the kids more. And it's a great program. We're lucky to have it here, I think.
It is encouraging, Mary, I mean, to see someone, you know, as experienced as you, who I would imagine, and Fred chime in, after you've taught for a few dozen years, you start to want to kind of get into the routine and do things the same way, which could not be very exciting for either you or the kids. And so I love the idea of, you know, having someone kind of step in and give you that reflection and give you some ideas and really kind of, I would imagine, remove some of the blinders that you might have in certain ways of doing things, which Lord knows we all need at some point. So it's exciting to hear that it's working. And you know, back to the rating piece, you know, we're moving teachers from developing to proficient to accomplished and to distinguished. I mean, that's really exciting. It's really exciting to see that. So
Conversations are much richer among teachers too, just from their practice of conversations with our coaches. It carries over to our peers as we're talking about our learning too.
excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you, ladies. Thank you. That is our presentation for you. And did you have final questions?
Oh, I'm sure we do. Questions?
Or we'll,
Go ahead, Josie. I know you said you had one.
So wanting to go back to the chart again of the amount of different levels that we last year had a lot of questions on as well.
This one or the pie chart?
Developing proficient. Now there was quite a few that had just moved from proficient. There's a lot in proficient the last year. Now this year there's a lot less, but then a lot of them have moved to accomplished.
Mm-hmm.
Was that just that a lot? What was the factor for that, or how did that? Did they just? That was a lot. I mean, it's like a couple hundred. Did they? Is that just that they're just coming on, or how did that?
well,
change?
it's, the data isn't disaggregated at the moment. I mean, it is all of the teachers together and just, so it's not broken out by individual teacher to see where they moved. It's just the, you know, the groups or the aggregated data. I'd love to put it all to, we're doing a better job. I think that the PD that we've been offering in the past couple of years has been very, very good and much more focused and targeted. So where we see need areas, I mean, we've taken a look at some of the McCrell data and seen where our teachers were lower and made sure to boost up some of the professional development offerings on those. So we have taken a lot of time to work on equity. I mean, to the point of putting some things in bathroom stalls. We also have we've worked with teachers on using some data. So one of the things that they do that does appear in the McCrell rubric is use of data for instructional planning. And so with the shift in focus over the years from a more minutes-based type of rating on PLC to a more goal-oriented and instructional focused base, I think we've moved the needle that way as well. So that's, you know, a couple of different shifts in focus and different things that we've emphasized. I think has made a change.
Yeah,
What
I would
you say?
underscore both the focus and the alignment. I think the work that we do at the beginning of the year, not only with the professional learning plan, but also the reflection that teachers do around those 5 areas of the STAR. And then in doing so, then we align the professional development opportunities to how do they dovetail with those 5 areas of the STAR, how do they work with McCrell, so that people know their areas of growth for the year, and then the accompanying opportunities to become better with that. And I think administrators or evaluators are getting a lot better about having conversations up front about what those growth areas are, so we're kind of really aligned and in it together to move forward.
And might I chime in just for a moment, because, you know, I was involved in this from the very beginning. If you go to the slide previously, when we, not that one, the one that has the rubric, or is it behind? I think we're back. Anyway, the one that has the rubric. One of the reasons we wanted to do this, as I remind you, board members, that was so important is we did not have a consistent system for evaluating our teachers. And when we do an evaluation system, as soon as you let people, whether it's a teacher, whether it's administrator, whether it's a student, as soon as you identify the behavior that they need to accomplish, performance increases. So if you look right here, we're very specific about what we're asking of our teachers in each of these areas. We're outlining it, we're setting those expectations. So it's similar to kind of standards-based grading, right? So as soon as you do that, as soon as you tell an employee what they need to do, performance increases. And that's what you'll see. That's what you'll see in that first year to second year. And then a lot of teachers tend to be by nature slightly competitive, and they won't admit it, but they are. And so, like, proficient, that was a big deal when we implemented this program. Do you remember that, Brian? What do you mean proficient is good? Proficient's not good. That's only a, oh, Lord, the communication we had to get around. Right, exactly. So, again, it's let's get them to proficient, and then let's build on that. And that's part of the beauty of the rubric, and that's the beauty of identifying those expectations. Now, do they need to change, and do we need to look at them and up the ante and make them relevant every year? You know, absolutely. But that's the beauty. So thank you for putting this together, MJ. I mean, just makes my heart sing that you did this and that you showed this.
I think the specificity within each element, within each standard, also offers a way for teachers to take a look at, you know, what they actually need to do. The more you outline that, I think, Lisa, you're absolutely right. The easier it is to live into an expectation that you understand.
Right.
When the expectations are unwritten or ununderstood, it's harder to live into them. So.
And the easier it is to set goals.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So you sit there and you go, oh my goodness, monitoring student performance. You know, I'm not doing that. So instructional coach, back to your conversation, help me with that. What does that look like? Who's doing that really well? And let me show me how that's going. And I mean, this is exactly what we hoped for when we put this together. And I know it's been a journey. And I know there's some of you in this room that were like, oh my God, there's a lot of work. and you know, will this improve? And will this improve teachers? And will this improve students? And it seems to be doing the trick, so.
Thank you.
Can I ask one more question? Any other questions,
ahead.
board member? Can we go to that inter-rater reliability? And I loved your word, dismayed. Dismayed. And that is dismaying. I mean, 15.4% is not great. What I'm happy to see is that, you know, you shared this data, and it is what it is. Can you tell us a little bit more about the system that you used to put this together?
Well, I can tell you a little bit about the questions. I mean, it is a based on what MDE gives us to use. We can tailor some of it for our own needs. Within the wording of the question for the 2015-16 data, that was about inter-rater reliability within the TD&E system. That was really taking into account just taking into account all the elements of the system. So the administrator evaluations, the peer reviews, we use the same rubric, as I said. The question changed, so we actually were asking a different question this year.
More specific.
Yeah, it was more specific, and so this question now was, among administrator evaluations this year, inter-rater reliability was consistent. So they removed pitting the instructional coach evaluations against the the instructional coach observations against the administrator evaluations, and they just wanted consistency within administrator evaluations. And all the schools, all the sites do something a little bit different. Sometimes probationary teachers will have 3 observations by an administrator, and if the site has more than one administrator, they might shuttle back and forth between who does them. And so this question, although I'm dismayed by the data, the wording of the question suggests that we need to help the administrators have more inter-rater reliability.
Right. Well, but in fairness, and this is something we toyed with, way back, is the instructional coach is looking for something very different than an administrator.
Yeah.
And their role is very different. Their peer, and it's very different. So I'm glad that they made that change, and I'm glad that we're aware of this data. So now we have work to do, and we know what we need to do, and that's the point of doing this. I am excited, though, to see how we are using data to inform those instructional practices and having a positive impact. I mean, we're doing really well there. And, the engagement with the PLC, I mean, that's dipped a little over the years, but
Well,
if I'm looking at that correctly.
Yeah, and I think we had truth be told, we had a rocky rollout with the changes in how the PLCs were going to work this year. So when the MOU was voted on and we changed the structure of that and stopped chasing, what?
I'm sorry.
and stopped chasing minutes and were really more in terms of practice and data focus, there was a lot of confusion about writing goals and things, and so we had to do a lot more teaching at the beginning of the year about how to do that than we had in the past. And so I would hope now that shift has been made and we are making no additional changes to next year, and that news was met with a hooray. I hope that you can only imagine. I hope that we'll see that the rating for that will go up.
Well, and so that explains it, because there usually is a dip in performance when there's a significant change there. So you will see that.
Yeah, we were actually very encouraged by that use of data going on, because the PLC requirement was that it had to have a student achievement focus, that had to be built into the goal. It wasn't just we read a book, it was to what end and how did it impact students. So people were more critically focused on data. And some are still waiting for whether it's an MCA result or things like that, but they've been concerned all year about the data and how does it inform their goal. And back to the administrator inter-rater reliability, it is something that we continue to monitor. We already have plans underway to do some inter-rater reliability in August with the whole admin team as well as all the coaches, so that we're all together doing that. Remember back when we started, we didn't have the deans doing evaluations. So that's, as we've added more people doing evaluations, there are more opportunities to have differences. So that's part of it. It's something we need to work on and try to tighten that a little bit, but it's a very human-based activity. So that's why it's so critical that administrators have those conversations up front about what are you working toward? How will you know, just like we do with students, how will you know when you're successful and what will that look like? We need to do the same thing with teachers, and then that takes a lot of the mystery out of it.
If you didn't struggle with inter-rater reliability, I'd be concerned. Because, I've been, doing performance systems for many years, implementing them in organizations. It's an ongoing battle. And, people change, leaders change. Like you said, there's new training. So, it is what it is. And I'm sure you'll develop an action plan to improve for next year.
And I just had a question, focus more on the instructional coach role. So if you have a teacher who is either not really interested in the QComp system or isn't really interested in getting, changing how they do things, how do you support teachers who just are sort of resistant to what you do?
I think you just have to be consistent. I mean, going in there and being available all the time. And I know that far on the McCrell rubric, progressing as much as that person should, perhaps. So we're working in tandem with the administration to help this person along. And that, I think, creates more buy-in for the person. And then also, when they're getting that data and seeing the results of what's happening with student achievement, and also the impact between the communication with parents and how that's creating a new positive relationship, I think then they start to get that buy-in, and I think they're ready to jump on board with McCrell.
Great, thank you.
The other element is, remember, this system is for teachers in good standing, so everything that's been presented along tonight in regard to the coaching model, if a teacher's on an improvement plan, then that's something that the administrator has direct supervision over. And it's not to say that a coach wouldn't be helping out in some capacity, but there's a different plan for that.
Amy, another piece just to add into your question. One of the changes we made last year was a consistent 3-year rotation for coaches. And so at one time we had some 2 years, we had some 3 years, and we went all to 3 years. And part of that was, really, like for Jess coming in the first year from a middle school to elementary, it takes a year to kind of build relationships with people. Then you really start hitting your stride that second year, and then you're gone. Right? So really trying to add some consistent time in there so they have time to build those relationships and start making some impact on what's happening in the classroom. So that's really the target of making that switch too.
And remind me, do we have that on a third? Do we have about a third of expiring every year?
Well, it's not that clean.
Well, because we start out with some 2 and some 3 and
that was the desire,
yeah,
that if
yeah.
people shift in roles and things. we were having a turnover of 6 this year.
Okay,
But the goal was to do a third.
maybe some year.
Someday.
Is there a relationship between how much experience a teacher has had in personalized learning with where they are on the developmental scale? Do you understand my question? I'm not sure I do. Is it, if I've been a teacher who's been working with personalized learning for 6 years, 5 years, whatever, I'm going on the assumption that an elementary teacher has been dealing with QComp longer than a secondary teacher. Will that person?
Do you mean personalized learning longer than a secondary?
Yes.
Okay, sorry.
Yes, that's okay. Will they move along the spectrum from developed to accomplished, et cetera, more quickly than the person who's struggling with? We're going to assume that we're getting into that. We've accepted that it's going to stay, but I'm still relatively new at it. Am I handicapped because of that?
I don't think you will be as long as that teacher would be open-minded and willing to learn and change. I mean, I think your question is a good one, but it's human nature that our innovators, the ones who are early adopters of this, jumping in and trying new things, they're already probably accomplished or better in leadership because they're jumping out and doing that. My guess is yes, that the ones who've been in that longer probably started out a little higher on the rubric, but I don't think that handicaps or cripples the other teachers in any way. I think one of the things that we do to try and get buy-in from struggling or reluctant teachers is to assume positive intent, and to find. I mean, we're very good at having that rubric schema in our head and being able to identify with a teacher all the cool things that they're doing so that we can affirm those things and then move from there. Nobody wants a coach to come in and tell them everything that they're doing wrong. And that's not really, I mean, that wouldn't be a good coaching model. So assuming positive intent, finding the things that they're doing great and helping them move from there, and then fill some gaps when there are some, by strategies like Mary talked about, being able to go and see another teacher working, or working with the coach to to either resource online or find some other strategies to use. That's what moves the teachers.
Our self-reflection that we are required to do is also a jumping off point for a conversation of where you want to work in here, based on your own evaluation of yourself. And that's helpful too.
And Fred, to your question, I think it can also depend on where the evaluator is in their knowledge and expertise of implementing
Yeah.
personalized learning. So
Yes.
I don't want to pin everything on the teachers.
No, and that leads to my next question. It is, and maybe you mentioned this or talked about this, Brian, and I didn't pick up on any specifics, but as far as administrators are concerned, it seems to me that that's a very, very vital cog that we don't talk much about. They were trained a certain way to evaluate, and it may or may not, it wasn't effective. And now, are they able to, I'm not asking for specifics, obviously, because it's none of my business at this point, but are they able to, as a whole, are they changing to the new evaluation, or is it still creeping in where, when push comes to shove, this is the way I always used to do it, and I'm going to make sure somehow or other it's going to look like I'm doing McCrell or QComp, but it's really going to be my old way?
I don't get a sense that that's happening. I think our level of expertise in understanding the McCrell and how it relates to the Personalized Learning Star and the work that we're doing around personalized learning, that may be a learning curve for some people, but I do feel like the time that we spend at DLT, so District Leadership Team, each month there's an hour set aside. This year we've been heavily focused on assessment, and so that's a key area that all administrators have been looking at. So I think we try to use any opportunities possible to bridge the two so that it provides them an opportunity to look for something specific and react to that inside the rubric. So we try to bridge it all, but again, it's a human activity and there's a learning curve.
One of the things, Fred, too, that we also do, and I would do that with principals, and now Amy is also doing that with principals, is we observe them in their post-observation conference with teachers. And so listening to how they're providing feedback to teachers, and then we are providing feedback to them on how they're doing in that process, and ensuring, are we getting to those things that we need to be, and it's not just, hey, you had a great year, Fred, we'll see you next year, right?
Yeah.
That it really should be a good conversation about where they're at instructionally and how we can help them get better.
Because there has to be that element of trust.
Yeah.
And there hasn't, in the past, it wasn't, it was boss and employee. Now it's more of obviously a team effort kind of thing. I just want to be sure that administration isn't being left out, and it sounds like they're not, in terms of progressing along with the rubric.
It's a critical piece of the puzzle, without a doubt.
This is a question that has nothing to do with anything except when it first started, the QComp was rumored that it wasn't going to be around long because of the financing. Where are we with that, from the state?
They have not they have not added any money to QComp. They also haven't taken it away.
Yeah.
Right.
We know that, so when you know, as I've sat in at meetings with AMSD and others, there are a number of districts who didn't get in and would desperately love to get in. And so they're maintaining the system as it is now, and you know, I don't anticipate a lot of additional funding to that or an expansion of that unless they do something significantly different in terms of funding to schools.
But they seem to be content with letting it go at where it is.
I think they'd have their hands full if they just completely pulled the rug out from people.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, any other questions? All right, thank you very much.
Good work. Thank you so much.
All right, next on our agenda is the demographic and enrollment study.
Good evening. Let's find that presentation here. Okay. In January of 2018, the district engaged the services of Davis Demographic and Planning to provide a demographic study for the school district. Tonight I have with us not only David Breck, who did a lot of the background work, but Lauren Woods. He's a regional manager and senior school planner from Davis Demographics. He'll provide an overview of his work and their team's work. As you'll recall, the district has used formerly a different demographer from Minnesota and based her information on October 1, which is what we looked at here as well, but those were done in 2011, 13, and 15. One of the things that's unique about the Davis Demographics and what we liked about them, their company and what they had to offer is not only will the information that you're going to see from Lauren tonight about, looking at where students reside and where we should be looking at for building schools, but then we will have the opportunity to take this a little further. We have some training coming up, and Lauren will talk a little bit about that. But then we'll be able to use this tool because it's software that we've submitted the data to them and be able to look at enrollment and enrollment trends and dig deeper into what's happening with enrollment, either positive or negative. So we're very excited about that. There's also a feature related to a school locator. So if you're living or moving to an area where it's not developed yet, you can point and click on the map and be able to see that as well. So some exciting stuff, and I know he's got some great information to share. So I'm going to bring up Lauren, and he'll do the study and provide information on that. There's a lot of information, so if we can kind of get through it and then maybe come back and get to some questions at the end, that'd be great. So thanks.
Thank you.
So just be a phone
Perfect.
arrow, is that okay?
Yep. Good evening. Yeah, our group we have several offices in the United States where our company represents school districts in 44 states now. And just happens we're out of Dallas. I moved there 5 years ago from California. Share with the staff here, I have a son that lives in Minneapolis for the last 12 years, went to school here and stayed here. Imagine a Southern California boy going to Minnesota to go to college. Go figure. So we have a little bit inside information throughout the years. So it's not Lauren from Dallas. It's Lauren Woods kind of already knows the situation, the growth patterns that are occurring, the exodus from Hennepin County, right? Mm-hmm. Work we've accomplished for the district for this, we've created a custom data set of GIS data. We're going to talk a little bit about that as we go through the process here. Incorporated area development projects and plans. That was real fun. Staff's probably share with you. You see in the report, there's a lot of information. Analyze relevant area demographics. We've gotten information from the state regarding birth factors and things like that. The county was great providing us with GIS information to help with the process. And then we developed a 10-year student forecast. And on top of that, at the end, you have 4 members of your staff that are going to have 3 fantastic days of training in GIS the following next 3 days. Yes. So part of the process is Dee Dee mentioned, this is GIS based. We're more concerned with, we already know enrollment figures. We've seen the tabular data, right? We see the daily attendance reports and things like that. We want to know where the kids were at the fall snapshot date. Where do they live within the district? To help us understand and get a spatial relationship the last several years, what's occurring within the district. So we geocode the kids to the world. Here's an example of an area within the district where the students were living as of, this was all 4 years of data. Each dot represents a child location. There could be multiple students there. The staff will have the opportunity and knowledge on how to symbolize and show this information later for more specific mapping. We take the attendance areas provided by the county that they'd helped provide and maintain this information, and then we did what was called an intersect and basically created, based off natural splits of the elementary, middle school, and high school areas, to create a base of planning areas. From that point, we went through and identified the polygons that represent the municipalities, major roads splitting down, so kids, if you start thinking about shifting attendance areas, that you take into major thoroughfares and things like that. And so you'll start seeing these polygons, these really small polygons. They're called planning areas or study areas. And those are the base, kind of the foundation of our study, the students and the study areas. Once we're done geocoding, we provided an open enrollment report and attendance matrix. This helps identify where students live compared to where they're enrolled. In this example, Bluff Creek, in the gray area, it says 511 students. 511 students were enrolled in Bluff Creek and lived in the zone, the current zone. We also provided one for your middle school and high schools. Keep in mind, these are just your District 112 students that are enrolled in the schools. I'm not including the out-of-district kids attending the other districts. Our methodology, pretty, well, it's simple as a flow chart. The work involved is a little more difficult, but it details we need to have good data to start off with. We need to have good student data. David was really good about getting us exceptional data. It was one of the hurdles. It took him a while to get it down. We went back and forth with making sure it was perfect. Because we're using that information to help us understand trends within the district. You know, you've heard of cohort analysis, right? Well, we do something similar, except it's spatially related, where the kids live within the district and comparing them from year to year in their transition. We also overlay the students on top of the polygons based off of the building types to give us an idea of the student generation rate, the student yield factor. How much are those new homes by Victoria Elementary? How many kids are going to come from that? Student yields, student generations help us understand what's coming from homes existing that are around that area to help us understand what we could predict. And then the student birth data, comparing students 5 years out as a base of information and helping us to apply that to this year's kindergarten counts to give us an idea of what future kindergartner counts will be in the district. So speaking of birth counts, this map here, or this chart here looks a little bit weird. It can be kind of confusing. We provide this just so the district can see what students have appeared after 5 years after they were born. It doesn't really affect the bottom line of the kindergarten counts, but what it does do is to help us understand that this green line right here, I think it's green, I'm colorblind, so. That green line right there is the market share that had been occurring in the district. And one thing that Dee Dee and David were asking was that you see this increase, it's over a +1, it's 14% increase over the next 7 to 10 years. And that's an indicator that we have families that are moving here that have not yet had kids, that will have kids, but they're just not even on the radar yet. Mobility factors, I mentioned this earlier, this is one of the factors that's used to help us understand the matriculation based off of this year's base of information. This is a 4-year comparison of student data. It helps us understand the ins and outs of each one of the attendance zones. So if you see green, that's a positive occurrence. That means that there's going to be more kids expected in the seats at that grade that following year. If you see blue, that means it's staying static, it's staying the same. If you see red, it's going to be slightly down. In your district, I had a colleague, I mentioned this earlier, some of your staff, I had a colleague go through the report and was vetting some of the information. The only first thing he says was, this looks like a young district. Because if I didn't show him anything else in the report, and I showed a person in our office this, and they saw a lot of green and blue, you're thinking of people that are either staying in the area or moving into the area. And then as you read on the report, we said, oh, well, of course, you have development, you have this other stuff that's happening, houses are turning over, things like that. So DDP conducts historic student data comparisons. So all this information, by the way, is being shared with you all within the district. So they'll have this information, they'll have the ability to do this on an annual basis now. The idea is that we're comparing students that live within each one of the study areas the last 4 years. And that aggregates up into the elementary zones. Doing this helps us understand, what's going on within the district, helps us understand housing resales, if there's foreclosures that are happening, apartment migration. This is kind of a big deal in areas where there's lots of apartments, and there's been changes in the way leasing has occurred. You can actually see the spikes or declines within an attendance area if there are a lot of apartments, things like that. Student generation rate, student yield factors. This is your district-wide, the last 10 years, single-family detached homes, 2015 homes. This information is based off of information provided by the housing information was provided by the county. We were able to identify that each one of these units, single-family detached houses, apply that to the mapping software, overlay the kids on top of that, and give us the relationship to how many kids fall within those areas. Under those, so you have 100 single-family detached houses, and you have 45 K through 12 that are living in there. It gives you your rate. So single-family detached, single-family attached, and apartments were the major ones. There you have a particular housing set that's in the area, especially in this area called villas. And in some cases, if there are villas, we try to determine if there were kids coming from existing villas. And villas are, if you talk to some of the housing, the real estate folks that are selling these, most of these are not marked, earmarked for families. They're mostly for empty nesters and mostly empty nesters. It's not really ideal for families. A lot of stuff going on in the district. A lot of the information that we receive is going to be front loaded into this, into the projections. And it's just a thing that's been occurring more and more with developers. They're less likely to give you more of their forecasted future ideas because they know this becomes public information. And what we discovered was right around the housing bust in 2007, 2008, they become less likely to give us more information on what their plans are on future development. Like I'm talking about stuff that's not even sent over to the city. Before, they were really happy about it, but it's a very competitive market. Well, you've been drive around the district, you see all the different developments going on. So you'll see a lot of stuff going on in the front end, the first 5-6 years, and it kind of trickles off at the back end. Keep in mind, there are things that are in the works that are the phasing was not available yet for us to give an accurate count of what's going on. So we did try to keep track of that for the folks here in the district. You'll see maps with the active and planned development. So when you see the word active, we're talking about, you see the guys out there swinging hammers, throwing up 2x4s and pouring slabs. Planned means that these have already been passed through the city or they're just starting to break ground. When you see something that says future, well, that's one of those ones that the data wasn't available once we hit go and at the end when it was time to start calculating this information. And we provide a list of information based off of all the development research that we've done. Keep in mind, this was done relatively pretty recent. David, when were we out here? 3 weeks ago? Yeah. So around the end of May, I spent a day and a half driving around. It was like 400 or 500 miles on a rental car. I only had to go 20 miles from the airport, so. But there's a lot of stuff going on in the area, and it's imperative that everybody here I know that we all, in our own communities, neighborhoods, we track it ourselves. We're our own little neighborhood demographers, but it'll be good. It's good that your district is bringing the stuff in-house to help keep ahead of the growth. Let me go back. Pardon me. Make sure that. There we go. So this information right here is the active. We have the planned. So some of this may have started turning soil, and then we have the future development. You see some of them, we don't even know how many units to expect or what type. We just kind of we just want to make sure that at least we have it in the information. There are dots on a map, and underneath those dots are spreadsheets of information that everybody can just update and then represent on a map if they need to. Once we're all done and we've applied the residential development, applied the student generation to the residential development, added in all the factors, then we start to produce our projections. Our projections are based on the planning area or study areas, and they're aggregated up into zones, elementary, middle, high. They can be represented by the municipalities if we've had those identified. So whatever geographies you could think of, we can create projected analysis on that. It's very, very robust. So for instance, this example is study area 273. And all that information is based off of what's going on in 273 in the next 10 years. And then that area becomes, I believe that's Carver. Yeah, it's Carver. And then those study areas are aggregated up into whatever elementary or middle school area that you want to provide information on. So when you look at a chart and you see something like this, these are your resident students served by District 112. Okay, not the entire student file that's provided, but just the resident students. The impact of mobility applies annually. Gives you that, it matriculates that base year all the way through. So the kindergartners next year, 760 kids. They'll start moving up. Eventually, when they get to ninth grade, that grade will grow to 951 kids. Now, keep in mind, that's not just mobility. That's also impact of development that's being phased in over the next 10 years. And then we have your subtotals for your projected enrollment. Your overall projected enrollment for the district is 11,367.9 students. Everybody asks why would you put a point at the end? Because it's a forecasted kid. We don't want to give you hard numbers. Never seen a 0.9 kid. He's very short. So your district is growing. This is, talking to people earlier. This is not a known fact, not an unknown fact. It's not a surprise. The benefit of doing it geographically, using GIS in this, it helps us understand what's occurring in specific areas. We can see the hot spots in the specific areas of the district. Those planning areas that you can symbolize to show a choropleth style map where they're color coded. Your elementary, at one point it is projected to peak out, to plateau in about 6 years, 7 years. I would not, like I've mentioned earlier, we have more housing coming online. I don't expect this to stand this way. I expect that wave to continue out in a few more years once we get more development information. Because there are lots that are sitting there, and I'm watching them, they're adjacent to other major subdivisions that are ideal. Farmland is ideal for putting in residential homes. I've seen this in the Crescent or the Treasure Valley in Idaho. Kuna School District is a good example where they're blowing up. And I was out there 6 months before the report, came back to visit them, and an area that wasn't even thought of, they'd already tilled it. The family that owned it for 2 generations sold it. And it was being converted into 360 more homes. You'll see maps like this. This is GIS. These are your attendance zones. On the left, for your elementary area, and on the right side are your elementary zones and a choropleth map, a color-coded map. If you see the little red polygons, those are areas within that zone that have the expected increase. Notice where they're near a lot of the corridors, right? One of the things I like, what I mentioned when I was here a couple weeks ago, I purposely stayed in Eden Prairie so I could avoid the traffic in the morning driving in, because I wanted to see everybody sitting on the freeway as I drove into the district office. And anecdotal, just from me being in the area back and forth over the last 12 years, it's a 45-minute drive just to drive within Minneapolis, right? It's like the running joke. But you see a lot of people driving out of here, bedroom community, into the cities. So keep that in mind. Spatial relationships towards around corridors, but you'll see a lot of orange and red in Victoria, Carver. Your middle school trends will continue. They'll peak around year 9, but again, we know that that's probably going to continue. Here's your middle school areas represented in a GIS on the map, along with the hotspots. You notice they're almost these red areas are in the same locations. The high school trend continue up. That even if nothing else happens within the numbers, this high school trend will continue through because you have that matriculation from the lower grades, that wave that's occurring. And then the high school areas. So in summary, your area should be expected to see growth over the next 10 years. There are 30 different residential developments projected or actively constructed or currently planned. What we did was we took them and put them into phasing too. So each one of those little areas, those little planning areas, you'll see small little polygons within neighborhoods that are being built. So later on, you folks can make maps and actually see the growth trends occur within those polygons if you wanted to. A lot of your development it's primarily in 2 locations. I can use the term a lot because it's 40% and 30%. You can just go on Google Map and turn on the overhead imagery, and you can see the stuff is turned on. You turn on your student to school locator that's on the website, and you'll zoom in the polygons. You can see the polygons are already there in advance of the development. So you have 1,600 new students can be expected from, and this is an impact of resale of existing plus the move-in resale, and then the new homes being built. So it's not just new homes that are driving this. So the increases, you also will see an impact in your kindergarten grade. You have your typical nationwide, there's a decrease in fertility. And in established, built-out districts, that's a big problem. You hear about, we have no kindergartners showing up. We have a kindergarten roundup, and we've lost 15% of our kindergartners from last year. That's not you. You're getting it the other way. People are showing up and then having kids here once they move. The district's high school population can expect a growth of 16% over the next 10 years. The middle school population is expected to peak at 2,600 in 9 years. And then the elementary grades, this is the one that's probably the most impactful. 4,800 students within 5 years. Your overall resident student population. Yeah. That it starts to, you notice in the graph it starts to tail off a little bit. This is something to keep in mind. If the housing continues the way it is, this is living in North Texas. It reminds me of places in North Texas where this housing is going off. You have plenty of people to build homes, where in some parts of the country, they don't have enough people to build the homes that are wanted. Any questions? And keep in mind, I'm here for the rest of the week. I'll be here all week.
You'll be here?
No, but, to tip your bartender. So if you have questions that are more, need a little more information, we could be able to draw up some more data, because we'll be working with the data this week.
So
Yeah.
one question that I had, I'm sorry, Ron,
No,
just jumped in, sorry about that.
That's all right.
How did you take into account that people are moving out of established homes and young people are moving into established homes and then having babies?
So that's
the trend I'm seeing in my neighborhood.
Yeah, that's the mobility factor.
Yeah,
So,
okay,
so,
that's what I was wondering.
so it's based on the kids are here the last 3 years. We have another snapshot this fall, and so you see that in the spatial relationship within your neighborhood.
Yep.
They were there, or they weren't there, and now they're there. So like you saw Victoria's numbers, and some of Victoria's numbers are a little bit higher than other parts of the district. By the way, those mobility numbers do not include planning areas with development. Those numbers are, because we've already calculated the development information. The mobility numbers are taking into account only neighborhoods that are already been built. So yeah, it's catching those kids that are showing up now. Mm-hmm. You have the neighborhood where there hasn't been an ice cream man in 10 or 12 years. That was me. I lived in an area where my kid was the youngest kid for about 10 years.
Right,
And then all of a sudden they started
when I
appearing.
drive through the neighborhood again.
Yep, there.
Right.
Yeah, right. You never heard the music, and then all of a sudden, I mean, that's the best analogy I can give.
Stand-up routine.
Yeah, exactly. Okay.
Yeah, so it's in there. We find it's a lot. It's use the tools to the best that you can. Use the tools that you have. It's one thing to have a table, enrollment table, and then go into Excel and, what's the relationship between the overall grades. It's another thing to use something that spatially you can do those relationships, and what are the actual ins and outs within an elementary area, because we can do it all the way up through grade 12.
Okay. Very good.
Yeah.
Is this, I know that this is looking specifically at our resident students.
Mm-hmm.
Is it assuming the same amount of students open enrolling that we currently have, or how does that?
Yeah, so we don't do anything to your open enrollment because the kids are attending from outside the area.
How about the kids going out? How about our resident kids that are going?
We don't track that, but we were talking about that. Dee Dee and I were talking about that later. So this, but in other areas of the country, school districts don't have that information of the kids that are attending other areas. California, you're on your own. Texas, you're on your own. You know that kids are living there because you see it in some census snapshot, but they're not all showing up at your doorstep, right? Minnesota and Pennsylvania are one of the few states that provide each district with that information. So we were just talking about how best we can use the software now to manipulate that information, help us track the people that are going to the district up north. Because we showed it on a map one day, and it blew me away because I just assumed they were going to be around the border. No, you can ask them for a map later in the week. We'll make one for class. It'll be an assignment. Hold on. Make map.
But this chart that you did with the green line and all the colorful bars.
Yes.
That would give us some indicator.
It would,
Oh, it's
but it's not. It's more of a general, just giving you kind of a general idea of a trend that's occurring within the county. Remember now, the kids that are born It doesn't matter in the data if they're attending here or not. It's just giving us a factor of growth. And the other part is because you have student and resident information from kids that are just born through 5 years old, we were also able to, not within the report, but helping us understand, oh yeah, we can see that this growth pattern is occurring, inward growth pattern is occurring because that number keeps on growing each year. The kids from kindergarten or from 1-year-olds the following year are now greater. The 2-year-old number is now greater. It's almost increases almost 100 people a year. So no, when it comes back down to the open enrolled kids, if there are some kids that are attending from outside the district here, we'll just apply a growth factor to them. If they're attending the districts to the north or outside, we won't track them because we don't have any control over them. They're not showing up at your doorstep. We're more concerned with where those kids are that are attending your schools that you need to focus stuff on.
Theoretically, then, if we had approximately 800 kids that we are projecting by 2022 that we're going to increase, if we increase our capture rate from where it's currently at, that could be greater than 800 then.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. There are some ways to do this, and I'm just, as you're talking, I'm thinking in the back of my head how to, because we're working in GIS, and part of the system is a Davis demographics tool that creates this information for districts throughout the United States. And I'm just trying to think right now about how we would apply making maybe the entire surrounding area study areas, all the other district study areas, and then just treat the whole entire student population as attending one study area or the other to help us understand movement. Those are different things we can talk in class.
So let me just jump in here too. So part of the reason you're not getting the full report and just kind of the high level overview is because, we still have the training to do, and so we fully understand what's there, so we can help you understand that too. And I think once we have a better understanding what's in there, it's going to lead to further conversations on how can we use that to look at capture rates and look at these other pieces. So this is a very robust tool, and it's going to take us a little while to figure out all the things that it can do and continue to work with Davis Demographics to kind of move in that direction. That's why we didn't dump, a 75-page report on you tonight, and we start diving into things that we just haven't had a chance to really dig in ourselves and understand, so we can, again, help you understand it. Then we're going to take that also with our facility study information, and that's what kind of gets merged into. Now that we know where the growth is and what those projections look like and what our capacity is in our buildings, that's going to give us a lot of information on kind of next steps as we move into the fall.
Although I have to say that this is a pretty robust executive summary. I mean, there's a lot of really good data here. And in first blush, now again, we do need to marry that facilities report, but I mean, at first blush, it looks like we're going to be okay at middle school and high school. Elementary is where we're going to have issues, is what we thought. But who knows? We'll see once we marry those two reports. And kids just never, ever move in and get born in the areas you need them to. So, darn, we got to work on that. Can you work on that? But I mean, this is an incredible amount of data. So very exciting stuff. Too bad Jeff's not here. I mean, he would be salivating.
Yeah, I'm not. By the way, by no means am I guaranteeing that David's going to be proficient demographer on Friday. The idea.
We know David. He will be.
It'll be Wednesday or Thursday next week because But the intent is the district take control of their own data. This is one of the things that's different between us and other companies is we want you to take control of your own data to help you guide yourselves, because really it's about the benefit of public education than it is anything else with our company. We're not some big company. We're just here. That's all we do is K-12 demographics, and we license out software that allows a district to continue the process because you've invested this much money and you get this, and it's a report, and it's within 3 or 4 months, it's outdated. Whereas now you've invested in this, you got this report, but David and Dee Dee and Craig and Joanne, they're going to be getting trained. They're going to go to these things. They're going to attend a conference. They're going to be more part of this process so they understand and be a better steward of the data.
Well, and that's really exciting to me because as nice as you are, I've been at this board table long enough that you're the third demographer that I've met just sitting here. So it would be nice if we could look at that data, and David does love his data.
Yeah, he does.
And keep this going.
Yeah.
Have more accurate projections in real time.
Well, that's it. That's exactly it. You won't have to wait for information. You don't have to wait till June. It's more of a January, February thing now.
Questions?
I put David on the spot. January, February.
It'd be good.
I apologize for being gone for the first part of it. But just to step back a second, so it sounds like you're taking census and other data, but you're getting kind of a household by household, kind of without specific obvious identities, but like in this household, there's currently this number of students.
That's a good way to put it. Right. We don't use census information, by the way, because the census snapshot was now eight years old. Right. Yeah.
So, but you use the data we have. So you have what I like, okay, so we can visualize that you have, right, we have existing homes, and you know the current situation. Then projecting forward through your history, you have these ratios, and you understand, okay, based on this size, probably this value of a home, you've got two kids that are a senior and a sophomore in high school. There's probably not a third one coming. But if there's a kindergartner and a second grader, there might be in 0.01 chance, whatever. There's going to be a third one coming, or
You're
a
getting
0.2 one coming.
You got it. That's exactly.
So with so then you put all these mobility factors. I would encourage you to think about. I mean, I get that you can't look at who's coming in because you're not looking at data for those homes, but presumably you've seen the data. You just alluded to it, that we have homes within our boundaries, and those kiddos are going someplace else, right? Mm-hmm. So the interesting, just to kind of note that, and then we obviously, and I think for your purposes, you model some ratio that doesn't change, right? Those same number of kids, those kids that we know are there are going to continue to go where they're at, and we'll capture some at a certain rate, and then as the kids get, as households grow and model, those kids will lead the district at a proportion similar to what it's been historically, unless we get data that changes that, right?
Well, so part of that, most of that is correct. Just keep in mind that every year these numbers are reevaluated. Think of student forecasting. You have a target, okay, and the target is a deer. And you're trying to track the deer. So what are you taking? You're taking in windage, taking in the horizon, things like that. Each time that you take in that target, you have to reestablish those factors. So what you're saying is, we have to keep an idea, track the trends and ratios within existing homes. But you take a look at it every year because that changes. You'll have price lines change in existing homes or resale homes. Price lines will start increasing because it starts increasing once new homes start coming in and you start seeing these nicer established neighborhoods. Those prices are going to start going up, which means what? It means less likely for younger families to move into those homes. They're going to move into the newer starter homes. Okay, so you'll see.
If we don't have many starter homes, that's going to be an issue.
Bingo.
So you have to look at what the inventory is and what it's forecasted to be.
Perfect.
So what is so you're looking at trends. You look at home values presumably change year over year. What other changes happen that you continue to monitor that you factor into the model on an annual basis per se?
So there are three factors. Three factors are the student generation, which you have to take a look at each year when you're looking at the student file. That's helps you understand what trends are occurring, especially with the new homes being built. The birth factors don't change, except they fluctuate, meaning that you have more kids showing up. That means that trend will start to uptick a little bit in your numbers. And the other one's mobility, and again, you track that annually with your mobility research, checking on your mobility factors. Those are your survival student cohort numbers.
Okay.
And those are the only three factors that affect our information, because student survival cohort is a snapshot of what's occurring within your district over the last 4 years, which reflects move-in, move-outs, resales, foreclosures, apartments, things like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you're wrong, why are you wrong?
Typically, when we're wrong, the housing bust, factors that were done in 2006, base year 2006, and then going into 2007, remember that fall of 2007 when you started hearing about the big developers starting to cancel contracts and things like that. No one was paying attention. And then all of a sudden, what happens? The housing bust. So if you have a district like yours, you need to be ahead of the game with regards to what's going on in the housing market, financing, things like that. When you read periodicals about the housing market, like the Fortune 500 CEOs were just surveyed, like it's in the article that's coming out this month. Most of them don't think that the next bust is going to be based off housing or financing. It's going to be something else. Everybody's been scared about that, right? About the housing bust. It's not going to continue. They're not really worried about that. They're more concerned with tariffs and international policies. And a lot of the, like Zillow and things like that, aren't really, you don't hear about their articles about the way. Has anybody bought a house recently? Hands up. Anybody? Okay. When you buy a house, remember buying a house 10 years earlier, 12 years earlier? Different story. So you're not having that volatility in the new home or resale market right now. And so the only thing I can suggest for the district is continue to watch the real estate market within your area. Just being a guy who knows, who's been around for about 12 years, knows basically what's been happening here. I don't think that that's something that is going to be an issue, because there's nowhere else to build but southwest. That seems to be the corridor.
Issue is just going to be how fast, right? So
correct.
The economy slows, the migration is going to slow for a while.
Correct. And then you have a bunch of different indicators. We can start talking about distance decay modeling and things like that, and fuel prices and the cost of living and comparisons. But that doesn't really kick into a school district until 3 or 4 years after it. And then by that time, it's already passed.
So do you have any recession built into your model at all?
No.
Okay.
Yeah. It's just based off of your student information.
And all those mobility factors, which underline, right, there's an underlying economic assumption, right?
Correct.
And all inherent.
Correct. Yeah, we don't pretend that we're economists in our company. That's just another part that I don't think it can be addressed in the big picture issue, but we're dealing more with specific issues within a district.
Right. But as you look at if David and crew wanted to play with it, based on your experience, they could model in some sensitivity if they wanted to say,
sure.
Hey, if you wanted to model there's a recession, your mobility rate's going to do this, your birth rate's going to do this.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. There's ways for everybody to adjust the factors accordingly. More often than not, when you look at our information, think of it as a very conservative numbers. You can see some debuggers will roll in with just doing survival cohort and using some algorithm, and that's great, but it's good for about 2 or 3 years. We're trying to give you kind of a conservative look at what it's going to be in 3 to 5 years to help in advance of these housing, or not student housing issues, where are we gonna place kids? Yeah.
And Tim,
Good questions.
I feel pretty good about it as it just, at kind of first glance at the information. It does kind of confirm what we've already seen is a lot of our immediate growth is in the elementary. And as that wave then middle school and then high school, which then hopefully gives us, a little bit of time to plan forward for those larger middle school and high school, but the immediate need being capacity at the elementary. And if a lot of that those initial projections are based on actual construction, we're more likely to probably see those kids, I think, in the short run.
Right, because all your stuff is active or planned, right? Active, you got shovels and dirt, right? And planned is,
They're past council,
they're past council and they're getting ready to lay, sewer, water, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, there's other methods that the district can implement later on. Doing your own build-out study to understand, looking at the general plans of the township and the cities.
Right.
I don't think the townships have any, but the cities will have general plans and try to apply what would it look like at the end.
Right. I mean, because you have those future developments, right, that we have some sense of, right? And you can sort of say, okay, there's going to be, high, medium density, low density, whatever, and then
Correct.
those start digging this time.
Yeah.
So your analysis then also, again, looking at just active and planned, so those developments are all in different stages, but you've modeled out each development for the appropriate stage, right? If they're halfway through, then they have X number of more units. If they're early stage and they got, so it's going to take 5 years for them to go out there through their phases, right?
Correct.
Okay.
So, and that's a great question. So each one of those tracks is based on, when I was driving around, getting out and talking to people, or talk to the contractor, not to the seller, because you can find out the actual building speed. But, for instance, they have 300 homes planned for development. We could have it phased out at 50 homes a year for the next 4 or 5 years, right? But that's information where you come back the following year and David says, hey, Lauren, it looks like they're starting to slow down. That's when you start applying those market effects. Hey, let's spread that out a little bit more. That's why I said these forecasts are a moving target, because now what you did last year is going to change this year because certain things have changed in the mix.
So when you did your analysis, your data collection, did you collect how many homes were, new homes were built in this area and in this year and that year, so you can kind of get a sense for what the pacing has been?
Yeah, we had a student generation study. That's what we did. So we took a look at your sampling over the last 10 years.
Okay.
And then it wasn't just district-wide. We started going, okay, here we are in Victoria. There's a lot of stuff going on in Victoria. What do these homes look like that are being similarly built? Where are those ones established? Oh, they're across the street. How many kids are coming from those homes, and how many are there?
Okay.
It's great. It's GIS. Makes life easier. You can use that tagline.
Okay, so you did look at the history, so you have an understanding of how they, for our community. And presumably you look at other communities that you're analyzing. Do you have a sense for how, how we differ and what our factors should be? And do they differ that much?
Okay, so that's a good question. So, we work with over 350 school districts in the nation. So my office, we represent about 70, 75 school districts this year, and out of 3 project managers. The neat thing about us, working with us, we really have a lot of information that we have from other areas. So when I see your school district and a friend of mine, a colleague of mine goes, hey, your district looks young. He has something to base it off because he just got done working on a project in North Texas where you have the same situation where families are moving into an area. You know, so for instance, your student generation rate, you know, it's at a certain number. It's similar where it should be. There's no outliers that concern us because it doesn't, nothing stands out. That's one of the nice things about doing this work and doing it often is that if something stands out, doesn't look right, it's usually picked up immediately. Like, oh, why are there so many kids coming from that? Oh, so many, the polygons from the county were wrong. We have to go through and check the county records, things like that.
Okay,
Yeah.
good, thank you. Sorry,
No problem. Great questions.
I think we have a,
Can I just add a couple of things to follow up with what he said? So as you know, previously when we've had the enrollment studies, and they've been a great benefit for us, we've taken that cohort survival along with the data on what is happening in those developments and tried to marry those up. And the demographer put less reliability on those developments, if you remember Hazel talking about that. And when Jim was here, we put a little more emphasis on that. So we did exactly what he's talking about. We had our Excel spreadsheet, looked at, you know, survival ratios, and we looked at how many kids were being produced out of there, and then we came to what we thought was the right number. And then we did exactly what Ken also said about making that number a little lower to be conservative so that we weren't overestimating where we're at. Well, now, you know, we're getting... so much has changed. The attendance boundaries have changed that it's almost impossible for us to do this on our own. And so the thing that I'm excited about the tool is being able to use it in the fashion that he's talking about, going out there and getting that information and gathering it. Another feature that'll be beneficial, and he mentioned a little bit, is that build-out capacity. So as you may know, all of our cities are doing their 2040 plans right now. They're wanting to know from us, where are we going to build the next school? And we want to know from them where they're putting in the developments so we can match those up and help. So I think we're going to be able to help not only our own school district, but be able to help the cities and counties to know where things are going, where roads need to go, where the developments are, and where we see people coming in. And I think it'll be very beneficial. So, you know, appreciate that he's brought forward this information. And as I told Lauren, I said, this is going to be a different presentation than the board is used to. But once we get through the training and have a better understanding of how we can use it, it's all of our student data. And David and his staff did a great job of getting a lot of information in there that we will be able to use and extract in a much easier way than developing Excel spreadsheets and tracking and manually taking care of it. So that's what we're excited about. And I know it wasn't exactly, here's the exact number of kids that'll be at Bluff Creek or at, you know, over these number of years. But we'll be working on that over the next month or two, maybe longer. Other questions?
no, it's great stuff. Looking forward to learning more.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Very exciting, thank you.
Oh, wait a minute. Exciting. Demographics and exciting.
Yeah. I've been doing this a long time, so yeah, this is exciting.
Very important data.
It is really important.
Thank you, you too. Pam, ready?
Yes.
Oh,
So I'm going to bring Pam up here, and we're going to talk about a couple of things. The next two agenda items Pam will go through. So 5.0 is the 2017-18, another budget revision, and Pam will briefly go over why we're doing a budget revision in June.
We're doing a budget revision in June because we made a mistake. That's the bottom line. Typically, we revise the budget in the fall after the audit and in the spring. This one is a correcting revision. We misinterpreted recording of long-term facility maintenance revenue, the deferred maintenance part of it. We had it in the construction fund, but we have since found out that you can only use the construction fund if you sell bonds and if the project is over $2 million and we just levied for our long-term facility maintenance projects. So we are moving 2.1 million in revenue from construction to the general fund, and then it's about 1.869 in expenses from construction to the general fund. We're doing this now for two major reasons. One, something that would just cause nightmares for me, is we would be over budget in the general fund for expenditures if we didn't adjust that budget up. And two, as we now, the next exhibit is looking at the 18-19 budget, it's just will be better for comparison if we increase that, because it's 2.3 million in FY19 in deferred maintenance, long-term facility maintenance in next year's budget. So it'll just be a better comparison. So if you remember, we were an alternative facility district, and we could use a construction fund, and we just kind of went on when using the construction fund when it turned into long-term facility maintenance. So it's a correction.
Questions?
That you did a very nice job of explaining that. Thank you, Pam.
Thank you.
All right, now to the fun stuff.
Okay. Where did you save this? Oh, it's right there. Never mind. I could have done that.
Budgets.
You got it? Yep, I got it. Okay, I have about just 12 slides to go over next year's budget for the general fund. But there is a 300-plus page
Get more water for Fred.
exhibit
Oh, Fred, there's a 300-plus page exhibit.
that was part of your board packet as well. It was out there by noon today. I don't know if you've all had a chance to go through all 318 pages, but it's fascinating stuff, really. Not. I'm sorry.
It is good stuff.
Anyway.
I didn't
Always
print
good
it.
stuff.
I
Want to keep those trees alive, but
It's just electronic. We just printed one, just in case you ask me. About page 301, what does this mean? I wouldn't be fumbling too much any more than usual. Okay, so we'll start with our revenue projections. We have 9785 in students. That's up from 215 students from this year. In Gen Ed, we have a 2% increase in the basic formula up to 6312. Special education, we have an increase, and the part of this is from the ADSIS program, the Alternative Delivery of Specialized Instructional Services. This is our second year, so we expect to recoup about 50% of our costs, 40 to 50% of our costs, and we spend a little bit over $1 million. So on that. Capital projects referendum increase. The presentation, if you're looking at board book, that says a 2.5% increase. It's actually a 3.5% increase. That's based on net tax capacity, and as that increases, that goes up. So the capital projects referendum, we also call it the tech levy. We're in year 5 of 6 on that. Then federal revenue, we have per entitlement. We're anticipating our entitlements. We don't know them all for next year, but to be about even. But we're actually showing a little bit of a decrease in our federal revenue. That's because we had a lot of Title I carryover from an influx a couple years ago, and we're spending that down this year. So we'll see a modest decrease. And then, of course, the long-term facility maintenance that I just brought up that will be included in our revenue, about $2.3 million. Moving on to our expenditures assumptions, we have salaries per contract. This will be the second year of the teacher contract, and then parameters for all of the other contracts. Utilities, a 3 to 5% increase, property liability, 10%, and then we'll have full year costs for the Dome or the Eastern Carver County Athletic Facility, and then the pool. Transportation contracts, the increase 3.25%. Other expenses, about a percent, 1.9. And then we have some cost containment built into this. At the last board meeting, when we talked about the other funds, we brought up food service has had an excess fund balance over a number of years. This is year 3 with an excess food service, so we're charging back about $505,000, and then we have another $500,000 in budget reductions.
Pam,
Yes?
what's driving the 10% increase in insurance?
That was, first of all, it's a really small number, relatively speaking, and it's because we're new into that self-insurance pool, we were just in, it was just a safe anticipation. It's actually just come in the last week, and it's less than that. It's more like 5% maybe, so we'll adjust it, but
It's just a big
it,
I know it's a small number, I was just curious.
yeah.
The other thing to keep in mind is that we have newer facilities as well. So we
I was gonna-
the
okay. I
valuation
was-
too will be part of
Right.
what
I was
we
gonna guess
anticipated.
that was, okay.
Yeah, that's part of it. And there are some other insurances that we now have that we haven't had in the past. For instance, cyber liability. We've got some pollution insurance that we didn't have in the past as well. So the 10% is what we built in, and as Pam said, the number's actually probably a little lower than that, so we'd adjust that in the fall.
Makes sense. And then on the transportation, we've got utilities going up 3 to 5%. And with all the, the stresses on transportation, do we think that's an appropriate assumption? Should it be higher?
We actually had, I think, if I remember, Positive Connections was 4.5%. I don't know exactly if I have the numbers, but the 3.25% was a weighted average between Cook and Positive Connections for their actual contracts.
Okay,
So we do more with Positive than Cook.
got it.
So.
And you recall, you approved those this spring. And so
Yeah.
that's the figure that's in there.
That's
It's
in
for both
Okay,
of those.
I just remember that being a higher number, that's kind of what I was wondering, so
Oh.
it's the Cook that's bringing it down. 'Cause
Correct.
I thought it was gonna be more like a 4 to 5 number, and when this is 3 1/4, I'm like, okay, so we're
It's a
good there.
weighted average.
Okay, thank you.
All right, then here's a nice line graph on our enrollment projections, which of course, after we've heard the most recent report here, this will be updated over time, but it shows a few years of history and then what our current projections are through 2022. Then looking at general fund revenue in total, overall, we have an increase of a little over 3%, or $3.6 million. Local property tax is up about $1 million. And if you remember, our levy was relatively flat, but our debt service went down, general fund went up. But we also are able to recognize next year $403,000 in excess TIF money. We received this money in the 13-14 school year, and it's been sitting in our deferred revenue, and we're able to recognize it this year. State revenue is up $2.9 million, or almost a 3.5%. That's because of the 2% increase in Gen Ed. We have 215 more students, and then that increase in special education. Federal sources, as I mentioned before, it actually goes down about a little bit, $120,000, and that's because we've spent our nice carryover in Title I. And then our other revenue, we're showing a decrease of a little over $250,000. This category we're probably the most conservative with as far as budgeting, because you can't always plan on some of those miscellaneous items like donations from year to year. Then we have a lovely pie chart with our revenue categories, and really this is just to illustrate our strong dependence on the state of Minnesota for our funding at 72%. And then property taxes at 22%, federal's just 2%.
And it seems like federal keeps shrinking, just to know.
It's been, well, we had a couple years ago some of that state stimulus dollars, so that went up, and now we've been pretty flat the last few years. Now moving on to the expenditures. We are up about a little over 5% overall, or $5.9 million. Then looking at the individual object series, on salaries, we're up 4.8 million, or 6.61%. Again, that's teacher settlement and other parameters. Our benefits go up relatively the same percent, 6.28%. We also have a 0.21% increase in TRA that was passed. And then all of our other categories all together, we go up $9,000. So overall, $123 million expenditure budget. Then looking at the pie, you can see here when we cut it by object series, 79% of our expenses are for salaries and benefits or for staff. And then 13% for purchase services, and that purchase services is going to include utilities, the transportation contracts. So those are the big ticket items there. And then everything else is 4%.
I'm sorry, I missed something on the previous table that revised budget versus budget.
Yes.
What's revised there?
Oh,
So that should be
this should say 1819.
on the right column, correct?
We missed it.
Okay. I was like, well, okay, that makes sense. That's
Wow.
kind of what I figured it was, but.
So, and then also that revised budget for 17-18 includes that LTFM that I
That's
just
what
talked
figured.
about
That's
too.
what I figured. Yeah,
So,
I was like,
even
okay.
though you haven't approved it yet,
That's
just for
18-19 budget on the right.
that is the 18-19 budget. Oh, I'm a little worried what I'm going to see now. Okay, then we talked about the pie and 79% being for salaries and benefits. And then if we look at it by program area, 73% of our general fund expenditures are for instruction. That includes regular and secondary education, vocational, special education, and instructional support. Then 10% is for pupil support, which is going to include our counselors, transportation and health services. And then 11% is operations and maintenance. And that one went up by 1% this year. We have a couple new facilities, but the biggest piece is that long-term facility maintenance that we've had in the construction fund in the past is now part of our general fund. And then school administration, school and district administration and support services have remained at 3% of each of our expenditures.
That's got to be, if we do a comparison of admin, that's a really low number. Have we ever done kind of a comparison on?
We compare ourselves to 11 other districts, and I don't think we have that in this, but we might.
I'll look.
I'm
Get a chance to get through.
I can add
Can
it.
you find that? No, I'm kidding.
We can get that for you for the next meeting.
Yeah.
But we can do that through schoolfinances.com has some charts for us that we can get that for you.
Okay.
If you call, probably it's about 3-4 years ago, we did a pretty in-depth study for the board on different, how our different costs associate with all of our comparable districts, and we provided that to you, but we can get those. We could bring it to the
And I
next meeting.
recall that, but yeah, it has been a while. So.
Yep, okay.
Thanks.
So in our fund balance, we're breaking it out into our required categories. First, we have non-spendable, which is prepaid expenses, inventory. We're required by GASB rules to isolate those. And then our restricted fund, those are typically required from some Minnesota state statute, things like basic skills, staff development, LTFM. And then our assigned fund balance are things that the district has decided to set aside to keep those funds in a particular pot for reporting purposes. And then the unassigned balance is what we pay the most attention to. That's one where we have a board policy that states we need to keep a minimum of 5%. Our goal is between 5 and 8% of that. And with 5 to 8% 5 to 12% of our expenditures, our budgeted expenditures, our actual expenditures at year end. So overall, that unassigned fund balance is at $10,328,000 or 8.38 for next year. And note, it does say 6/30/19. We have the right year there, thankfully. So it's this chart's giving you a couple years of history, what we're budgeted at for this
It's
year.
exciting, isn't it?
It's sad.
You just
It's
never
actually
know
really
what stream
sad.
of consciousness you're in, and like, I've been there.
Anyway.
If you haven't messed up a slide in front of people, you haven't lived.
That's right.
Oh, that's true. I think maybe I have before those. So, anyhow, I'm going to move on. So, a couple of updates from previous presentations back in March. We went over the capital-related budgets. There's been a couple of changes there at that point in time. We hadn't allocated all of our operating capital because we didn't have finalized enrollment. That's been updated in here. If you wanted to review that, it's page 160 to 185. That's pretty exciting. And then the other thing is the LTFM is now moved from construction to the general fund in that section as well. And then on food service, last month in May, we presented the food service fund, part of the special revenue funds, and we didn't have that it's actually $505,000 in a chargeback. That's in there now. I don't have the page in front of me. 187 to 188, if you want to read through all of that. And then our next steps will come back on June 18th, review any changes or updates. In this book, I don't anticipate any number changes. I think we're pretty well set with the actual budget, but we have a few more photos to add and a few texts, a few paragraphs to maybe make more clear. And then, of course, if there are any legislative changes, we would incorporate that, but that's maybe somewhat doubtful. And then we'll quickly review all of the funds again and then ask for approval.
Any questions, Fred?
It's crystal clear to me, Mr. Chair. I know more today than I did yesterday in this area.
Pam, you had mentioned that TRA was in the expenditure, the change for TRA. Is it also reflected in the revenue then as well, the offset?
It is, yes. And it's based on the prior year, so it's...
Gotcha.
All right. Any other questions? Everyone's got their bedtime reading?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't know how much is retained, but this is very helpful in terms of understanding it at the time. And I haven't always been there, so I appreciate the way you made the presentation.
So honest.
Thank you, Fred.
Oh, I love it.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Pam.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I believe we're on 7.0, long-term facility 10-year plan. As you know, in 2015, the Minnesota legislature established long-term facility maintenance funding to address much-needed funding needs for schools for deferred maintenance. Last year's long-term facility plan was reviewed by Mick and his staff, updated to address any additional facility needs or any other changes that we have based on any urgent needs. The funding is meant to replace a facility item which is worn out or past its life expectancy. It's not for new. So some of the things that we use ours for is flooring replacement, that's both carpet and hard surfaces. An example is an air conditioning, compressors, plenty of roofing and mechanical, as well as bituminous and concrete. And I'll show you a couple of charts here in a second. But also in your packet is information on the Southwest Metro, and as all of the school districts that belong to the Southwest Metro Intermediate District, we also need to approve their portion of their long-term facility plan, which is $250,000. that's allocated out to the member districts. So our share of that is $63,774. That number is up from the previous year, which was $35,002. And the reason for the increase is the new finance director there read over the ruling and realized that part of the vocational funding or that vocational participation should be included in that and hadn't in the past. So this is just making it right size. So we use a lot of vocational services at Southwest Metro. So that's included in that. Funding formula is based on the average daily membership. It's based on age and square footage. It's also looking at the alt facility funding. As you know, we sold bonds almost 7 years ago. That's included in it. And then there's some increases in fiscal year 19 of going from $292 per pupil unit to $380 per pupil unit. So with that, I just wanted to show you a couple of slides. This is looking at it by project type. So you can see the majority of our projects are in the roofing category, followed by mechanical, and then bituminous, as well as we've got a lot of funding put aside for lockers and some for carpet and flooring, and then a smattering here and there. Then if we were to look at that by school, and hopefully I can get all that in there. Some of our older schools are needing some work. Chaska Middle School West and East, both of these schools combined have close to $8 million set aside. Chaska High School is at the age where we're starting to see some replacement. Bluff Creek as well. So this is how we're spending the dollars. As we go out 10 years, anywhere from that 5 to 10 years, it gets to be a little more. We've got some money set aside district-wide. We kind of allocate it back those future years based on kind of square footage and age of the building. So the first 5 years, I think Mick would say that we've got a fairly good plan in place. This coupled with the facility study that we're doing, we have a lot more needs than what we're showing here as far as our budget at a little over $2.5 to $3 million a year. So these items will be addressed, and this plan will be brought forward to the Department of Education. We have to have that submitted by July. So we would ask if you have any questions on that. Mick is here to help with the questions. Otherwise, we'll bring that back at the June 18th meeting, asking you to do two things, and that's one is to approve the district's, the Eastern Carver County's plan, as well as then looking at the Southwest Metro and passing that resolution, which you got a copy of that in your packet. So it'll be 2 agenda items, I believe, next time.
Does that make sense, everyone?
Yep.
Okay. All right.
All right.
Thank you, Dee Dee.
Okay.
Take care of those roads.
So the next one, I'm going to bring Mick up here. And just give you a little background on it. Minnesota statute requires lead and water plan for public schools. So Mick and his staff have worked with a consultant and conferred with other school districts to look at their plans. So he's going to review the plan with you, which again said is required by July 1st for the board to approve that. We'd be asking you to do that on June 18th. And he'll just touch lightly. You've had the plan in front of you, but I'm sure you're going to have some questions about radon testing, so he'll talk about that a little bit as well.
Good evening. Excuse me, you'll have to forgive me. My allergies are kicked up really high today. So, as Dee Dee said, Minnesota statute requires public school buildings serving kindergarten through 12th grade to test for lead and water in all potable water sources, potable meaning water for consumption, every 5 years. The management plan for lead and water that we developed was developed to identify and reduce the potential for exposure to lead in water and to comply with those requirements. Our plan is to actually test every 3 years. So every building will be on a continuous plan along with radon, as I will touch on later. The EPA recommends that school take a remedial action and address lead and water exposure whenever lead levels exceed 20 parts per billion.
We've had a couple of unused spaces that have reached that mark, but we've rectified those at this point. Identifying potable water sources in the district facilities includes sinks, drinking fountains, kitchens, staff lounges, classrooms, any fax rooms, and hallways, and they will be sampled during the school year throughout the district. Eastern Carver County last sampled all of the water sources in 2016. That's calendar year 2016. The next 5-year cycle will become due in year 2021. As I said, we will be catching all of them before that, but at the very least, we'll be doing them by 2021. Prior to that time, if we find any fixture or water supply that is reading above that, that'll be taken out of service or repaired or replaced as per code. Water sampling of the identified cold water taps is conducted as a first draw sample, which means it's the first sampling of the day before any kids have taken drinking water, any pots are filled in the kitchens, etc. Normal usage of the building should occur the day before sampling, which means it'll be a regular school day. So we won't be sampling during the summer as the activity is extremely low in the summer comparably. So all samples will happen during the school year so we get an accurate reading for our usage. If lead content ever exceeds the 20 parts per billion, as I mentioned before, fixtures are taken out of service until it can be reduced to that 20 parts per billion or lower through either flushing of the system or replacement of the fixtures. All fixtures will be flushed when the building has been at low occupancy, for example, over summer break. So when we come back before school starts in September, every fixture in the district will be flushed for a minimum of 10 minutes, just to ensure that we're getting the best quality of water for our staff and students. As per Minnesota's statute, a copy of the district's lead and water drinking water test, which is what you have, will be made available to all the staff and the public through our district website and or upon request through the district office. If you take a look, or I don't know if you've had a chance, we do have in the packet the actual schedule. It's Appendix A in the back of the last time that the buildings were tested and then when they are scheduled to be tested again. As I commented earlier, we're doing the same thing with radon testing. We have conducted some radon tests. I have the same type of information as to when they were tested, what buildings, et cetera, and we will continue with that continuous testing as well every 3 years. We're just going to get on a 3-year cycle and just hit every building every 3 years. That's all I got.
Have we ever had any issues with lead and any remediation required?
We've had, last year we had one issue in a drinking fountain in a gymnasium. It's been completely replaced, piping, the whole 9 yards, and that's been testing fine. We had a couple of sinks in custodial areas that they don't really use the water for drinking, let alone, I mean, they're kind of the storage closets, not cleaning closets, so the faucets just kind of sit dormant. So those would be the only areas that we've ever had problems. Nothing, besides that one drinking fountain, everything else has come back favorable.
Great.
How about radon? Any issues there?
No issues. We had one borderline space in one of our buildings, but we have rectified that situation through ventilation.
Great.
Thank you for the update.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Vic.
Good luck with the allergies.
Last but not least, right? School district census. So the community service levy is based on the census or population of all residents within our districts. And Davis Demographics, who you heard from earlier today, provided the district with the most current census data. They actually took all those maps that you saw, populated that with residents within our district. And I feel really good that we have a good number. Previously, we kind of based it on information that was collected from our cities and from the county and whatnot. This is gives us a little better details about it. So it's 58,817, up a couple thousand, almost 3,000 from the last report that we did, and that was in 2014 for census year 2013. So with this, this really does, like I said, as I mentioned, affects the community services levy. I did a quick calculation. There's 3 different areas that it affects: the general community service revenue, youth services, and after school. And if I missed one, I apologize, Jackie, but I was looking at the levy certification. And doing the numbers on that, it's about a $20,000 increase in the overall revenue, which would impact the local taxes. So this, again, would be brought back at the June 18th meeting, asking for you to prove that it has to be approved or set in place by the school board before July 1st. Any questions?
Does that make sense what we're doing, everybody? That we're
You bet.
gonna. All right.
Okay.
Thank you very much. All right. Pam, I think, is Pam still here? I think Fred wants to go through some of the, no, of course not, pulling your leg. All right. With that, we'll move on to 10.0, which is other. Do we have anything other? Okay. Well, thank you, Amy, for filling in. And apologize for being late and having to step out. So thanks for dealing with that. But have a great night, everyone. Appreciate it. This meeting is adjourned.